What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's time for another episode of the best armies in Warhammer 40k, the weekly video series where we go through undefeated results from the past weekend of competitive 40k and talk about what's currently winning. This is for the weekend of April 11th and 12th, 2026, and I am on my way back from the Battle for Salvation team tournament that I covered all throughout the weekend. So if you want to go see some absolute cutting-edge 8-player team WTC format play, I showcase matchups between teams including some of the best team players in the world, including players like Innes Wilson, David Gaylord, Sam Pope, Liam VSL. All of those were featured on the channel, so please check out my live coverage of over on the live tab. But as always with this series, we're going to be covering singles events, and this was an insane weekend for singles play, one of the largest that we've seen, including many events with multiple undefeated players, which means this is going to be a long episode, and we are going to be rapid firing it as much as possible. Now, moving into a metagame breakdown, we can see that Chaos Space Marines remain as the top performers in the meta, unsurprisingly, taking down the Twin Dragons April GT, Anzac Cup, Collector Mania's April GT, Iberian Open Barcelona, with one of the 5 undefeated players from that event playing Chaos Space Marines, as well as the Bristol Vanguard's Vanquish. Some of those events even use some of the new Defiler profiles, so that is what we're going to be talking about today. The more things change, the more things stay the same, as we see both Ultramarines and Necrons, in addition to Tau Empire, continuing to do well. Ultramarines took down some of the largest events of the weekend. That included the South Coast Super Major and Battle to End Alzheimer's, both of those relatively long 6 to 7 round events. I should mention Ultramarines did ended up taking second place at South Coast Super Major. They ended up losing out on tiebreakers to Tau Empire that took first place, but still went 7-0 undefeated. They also went undefeated at the Anzac Cup and Legea Primus Open. Necrons also did well at the Battle for Green Hollow Singles and Clash of the Titans X Gashhammer. Tau Empire took down the South Coast Super Major, as well as won the 40k Spring Retreat. Thousand Suns did well at the Iberian Open Barcelona. As I mentioned before, that was, I think, 160 players, but only ran 5 rounds, so ended with 5 undefeated players, 2 of those being Thousand Suns players. We also saw something similar happen from Deathwatch. They went undefeated at the Iberian Open Barcelona, but we also saw them take down Bedlam in the Berg. Those were not the only Space Marine chapters to do well. We see both compliant and non-compliant chapters doing well, including Blood Angels, also at the Iberian Open Barcelona, becoming a common refrain, as well as Salamanders from the April GT. Death Guard won Fool's Errand. Leagues of Votann and Adeptus Custodes both got undefeated at the Silicon Valley GT. Orks ended up going undefeated at the Legea Primus Open. Astra Militarum took down the NSGRC. Adepta Sororitas won Battle for LA, parentheses, in Pasadena, end parentheses. Chaos Demons winning the Il Lo Regna Mortal, with a list after my own heart. Imperial Knights going undefeated X0-1 at the Battle for Big Country GT, and Genestealer Cults, last but certainly not least, winning Extra Schnicht 5. And so with that, let's hop into some lists. We're going to start with Chaos Space Marines and move over to the Bristol Vanguard Presents Vanquish 2026. This list was piloted by Dan Richards and was a Pact-bound Zealot build. This event did use the new Defiler datasheet that has been doing the rounds recently. A lot of buzz about these big crab boys, and in this case, Dan was playing a Pact-bound Zealot list to make the most of their ranged output. This included Abaddon the Despoiler, Cypher, Huron Blackheart, 2 Traitor Marauders, as well as Vashtor the Archifane for that delicious +2 strength. We have a single Cultist Mob as well as a Legionary unit. Interestingly, here the Cultist Mob has Mark of Slaanesh. That's likely so it can embark into Slaaneshi transports, because we do have a Chaos Rhino with Mark of Slaanesh in there. We do have a Chosen unit, as well as a pair of Mark of Nurgle Defilers, a Hellbrute, the Masters of the Maelstrom, and a single Mark of Nurgle Venom Crawler, in addition to a Nurgling squad. The obviously full combo here is that we are going to use these Pact-bound Zealots ability to give improved criticals, typically improved criticals on sustained hits for Mark of Nurgle units when shooting. That can be improved to lethal and sustain on critical 5s when they are within 6 inches of the Hellbrute, which you can fish for using Abaddon the Despoiler. So those Defilers can lone operative themselves, so they can be difficult to interact with, which helps deploying them because their bases are so large. Then, when sitting next to both the Hellbrute and Abaddon the Despoiler, they can reroll all of their hit rolls to try to fish for lethals and sustains. When they get those sustained hits, they can potentially reroll those wound rolls as well in order to convert those sustains. The lethals will automatically convert, which means they are close to 100, or if not greater than 100% conversion rate on their attacks, and that includes their up to 12 Excruciator cannon shots in addition to the 4 las cannon shots that they are bringing. All of these are running the twin Hades las cannon arrays in addition to Excruciator cannons and Ectoplasma on their turret weapon, which I think is probably the build to expect out of Defilers. You want these things to be doing as much damage at range as possible, which is the easiest thing to get access to, and combos best with Pact Bound Zealots here. I think the big thing is the defensive mechanic that Nurgle units have access to in Pact Bound Zealots. Being able to provide stealth and potentially a lone operative effect to these things does allow them to trade shots much more easily, which is a little bit tough for a unit as large as these are in other cases. Now, with that, we're going to move over to the South Coast Super Major, and the second place placer there, this is Manny Chima. Now, this was, as I mentioned before, one of the largest events of the weekend. I think the largest singles event of the weekend, running 251 players. Manny Chima ended up going 7-0 with the list, taking second place due to tiebreakers. And this was a Gladius Task Force build, and looks like a Gladius Task Force build from a couple of months ago, actually, sort of prior to Victrix Honor Guard nerfs, because it is just 18 Victrix Honor Guard and a bunch of other stuff. So this is running a Gravis Armored Captain with Artificer Armor as a utility unit, in addition to a Tech Marine, which is a nice alternative utility unit too. We have Kato Sicarius and Marnius Calgar, as well as Uriel Ventress for attachments into Victrix Honor Guard units. 2 Incursor squads to improve the ranged units. Because we don't have Rabuta Gilliman in here, the access to Oath of Moment is a little bit limited. You only get 1, so we're probably going to need to Oath of Moment something one of the Victrix Honor Guard units are going into. The Incursors will certainly help out the shooting attacks without requiring them to have Oath of Moment to get all their damage out. From there, we have 3 Repulsor Executioners to benefit from that +1 to hit we can get from the Incursors, in addition to 18 Victrix Honor Guard in 3 units of 6. That's it. That's the entire list. Very straightforward and a very classic build. Turns out Victrix Honor Guard's still good, so there you go, I guess. Now we're going to stick with the South Coast Super Major for a moment here and talk about the actual winner of the event. This is Ross Tully on a Kroot hunting pack. Ross over here is saying that the Twin Lance is overrated and 185 points is far too much for it because this man has taken literally no Tau models. There's not a single Tau cast member to be found in this entire list. Everything, and I mean everything, is some form of auxiliary. That includes a pair of Kroot Flesh Shapers, a Kroot Lone Spear with Kroothawk Flock, as well as a Trail Shaper with Nomadic Hunter, and a War Shaper with Root Carved Weapons. Those guys are going to attach into a combination of the 80 Kroot Carnivores in the army. There's 4 units of 10, as well as 2 units of 20, in addition to 2 units of 10 Kroot Farstalkers and 15 Kroot Hounds in 3 units of 5. From there, we have the classic 27 Kroot Cavalry. That includes 18 Krootox Rampagers in units of 6, 9 Krootox Riders in units of 3, and for a little dash of utility, we have a unit of 5 Vespid Stingwings. This list is a classic. A lot of times we'll see it backed up by ranged attackers. We'll see things like Tau Riptides or the Gunships, Skyrays, or Hammerheads to deal some long-range damage. In this case, we have simply decided to push the OC characteristic of the army as far as possible and assumed that enemies that are building to fight units like Catan Shards or Defilers will not have the attack volume to deal with it. That seems to have worked with this army going 7-0. Obviously, it is mass high OC objective secured, in addition to very threatening cavalry units, and you can even respawn those Kroot when they die. They have stealth baked in, and they get a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks thanks to the detached ability. So just extremely difficult to interact with profitably, and that seems to have worked. With that, we're going to move over to some smaller events. This time, the Clash of the Titans X Gashhammer Gaming GT. This was only 34 players, but was won by Daniel Nagai, who is playing Cursed Legion, which is kind of cool to see. Now, this list did still include a pair of Catan Shards, a Catan Shard of the Nightbringer and one of the Void Dragon, in addition to a Hexmark Destroyer, a Luminor Ceres, Necrosaur Amintar, an Overlord with the Destroyer Onk, and a Scorpek Lord. In this case, we are largely sort of anchoring the list around the Catan Shards, but a lot of the aggressive units are going to be these Destroyer units, which may get the benefits of the Cursed Legion detachment abilities. In this case, we have an Immortal Squad for a little bit of backline. We have a unit of Flayed Ones for early game utility, plus a Canoptek Reanimator to keep these units alive. A unit of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers with Enmitic Exterminators to give the list a little bit of anti-infantry shooting that allows you to clear infantry units without having to fully commit the melee units like Catan Shards or Destroyers into the fight. We also have an Ophidian Destroyer unit and a Scorpek Destroyer unit. These Ophidians good for a utility, and the Scorpek Destroyer is good to attach in with the Scorpek Lord and act as a late game counterpunch. Last but certainly not least is a Lich Guard unit that's going to attach in with the Destroyer Onk Lord to get improved movement. They also then get access to advance and charge. So this unit can go extremely quickly, especially in some cases we take the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud. We're not doing that today. We just have a Resurrection Orb Overlord, which means that the unit is very difficult to kill because it's going to be able to reanimate at the start of a phase. However, it's not quite as fast, or it doesn't have the reliable threat range as the Translocation Shroud guy. But that's okay, because they're still going to be flying across the table. It is 10 guys with -1 to be wounded, and those Dispersion Shields for a 4+ invulnerable save. So between those and the Catan Shards, the army is actually very difficult to kill, something that can be a little bit of an issue for some Cursed Legion builds that are focused more heavily on Destroyers, which are not the hardest thing in the world to kill, especially if you have a heavy infantry sweeping. This list kind of dodges a lot of that and instead focuses on those very efficient, very resilient Catan Shard profiles to kind of anchor the game plan. Now moving over to the 142 player, I think I overestimated its size earlier a little bit there, but 142 player Iberian Open Barcelona. The winner of this event, the first of the 5-0 results, was Joel Gallego, who was playing a Grand Coven Thousand Suns build. In this case, Joel was running an Exalted Sorcerer with the Umbralific Crystal, a second Exalted Sorcerer with Incendium, in addition to the OG Infernal Master with Eldritch Vortex of Etaf. We've seen that moved to a Winged Demon Prince in recent years, but the classic is, of course, that Infernal Master with that enhancement. We have Magnus Red in addition to a Standard Sorcerer, a total of 20 Rubric Marines. That includes 4 units of 5, 1 Chaos Rhino to carry some of those guys to the fight, a Mutalith Vortex Beast for some mid-board presence, in addition to a big Sekitar robot unit. That is 4 Sekitar robots. The nice thing about that is it gives you actually legitimate Overwatch threat. These guys do Overwatch for free, which can generate some value, but if you're running only units of 2, sometimes it can be a little inconsistent, and your opponent will just trigger it and make you burn your Overwatch early because you might as well make use of it, but you don't expect a ton of damage. However, staring down the barrel of 4 Hellfire missile racks plus potentially their flamethrower attacks is a little spooky, and a lot of players will try to avoid them for as long as possible. Plus, it gives you pretty good access to an early game alpha strike, so if you go first, you can get those guys up to move block and take a lot of table space, which is great. We have 2 units of Zangor Enlightened, as well as a Fagcaster Greatbow unit, as well as 2 additional units of Zangors for lots of utility. Fairly classic Grand Coven stuff, although this list is very scoring heavy, and it's cool to see that OG Infernal Master back in there. Now with that, we're moving into Space Marine factions, and we're going to move over to Bedlam in the Berg, which was won by Travis King, running Deathwatch. In this case, he was playing a Black Spear Task Force with a Thief of Secrets Gravis Captain, a Beacon Angelus Judiciar, a Combi Weapon Lieutenant, and a Watchmaster, with a unit of 10 Deathwatch Veterans for that Judiciar to hop into, an Intercessor Squad, 1 Eliminator Squad for some early game utility, in addition to a Fortis kill team, a total of 3 Fortis kill teams, I should say. One of those is going to be the attachment for the Watchmaster, especially to unlock either free stratagems for mission tactics or for special issue ammunition, which you can then apply to the Indomitor kill teams for free, which is nice. We have a pair of Incursor squads to improve the accuracy of those Indomitor kill teams, and then we have 2 total Indomitor kill teams, all of those with standard equipment. That includes melta rifles, multi-meltas, power fists with flamestorm gauntlets as well. That was not the only undefeated Space Marine, however. We got a lot of more Space Marines to talk about, and in fact, not the only Deathwatch. We also saw Deathwatch at the Iberian Open, but we also saw, even more highly placed, Blood Angels at the Iberian Open, this one being run by Borja FM. In this case, he was playing a Liberator Assault Group with a Blood Angels captain with Rage Field Warrior, a Jump Pack captain with Speed of the Primarch, Chief Librarian Mephiston, Commander Dante, and a Combi Weapon Lieutenant. We have a 5-man Assault Intercessor squad, not standard intercessors, the Assault version. That's likely for the Rage Field Warrior standard captain to hop into because they can give him access to wound rerolls when you target enemies on objectives. We have an Impulsor to deliver some of those ground infantry, 1 Jump Pack Assault Intercessor unit, in addition to 3 units of 3 Sanguinary Guard for the other characters to hop into. That includes the Jump Pack Captain and Commander Dante. We have Mephiston and the Combi Lieutenant obviously are going to be by themselves. We have an Incursor squad to buff the ranged attackers in the list. That helps make the Oath of Moment go a little farther, so you can apply Oath of Moment to your melee attackers, because this list doesn't take a lot of Death Company, who are kind of Oath of Moment agnostic, and instead is relying very heavily on the Oath of Moment rerolls to make those attacks more consistent, especially when you're talking about that Rage Field Warrior captain. He really wants to get the hit rerolls locked in there when he is attacking. We have a pair of Bald Predators, though, that I guess could benefit from the Incursor squads, even though they're mostly torrent weapons. However, the big thing is going to be a pair of Vindicators that are going to then hit on 2s thanks to the Incursors. As some additional utility, we also have a pair of Scout squads. Now, moving on from there, we're going to move over to the aptly named, I guess, April GT. It did take place in April, so that makes sense, which was won by Michele Forgione, who is playing a Firestorm Assault Force Salamanders list. This included Adrax Agatone, a Lieutenant with Champion of Humanity, a Combi Weapon Lieutenant, and Vulcan Heston. We had a standard Intercessor squad, in addition to a pair of Impulsors and a pair of Razorbacks. 1 Blade Guard Veteran squad that can dual attach the Lieutenant and Adrax for an absolute humdinger of a melee threat, getting full wound rerolls and lethal hits and ignore modifiers on all of their attacks. That includes hit, wound, saving throw, and damage characteristic modifiers. Pretty wild. We have a Company Hero squad for Vulcan Heston to hop into, so he's very difficult to kill. A pair of Devastator squads, all of those with multi-meltas. Those are going to go into the Razorbacks to then benefit from fire support from the Razorbacks. The nice thing about Firestorm Assault Force is that you can also rapid embark at the end of your opponent's fight phase, so that you can jump out of the Razorback, shoot, and then if the Devastator squad is not killed, you can then hop back into the Razorback on your opponent's turn and then benefit from the rerolls from the detached or from the data sheet ability once again. We have an Incursor squad to help out those guys. Their accuracy is a little bit low, only Ballistic Shield 3, so the Incursors help quite a bit. A pair of Infernus squads to go into the Impulsors, in addition to a Land Raider Redeemer, which is going to carry Adrax Agatone around, a Scout squad for utility, and a Vanguard Veteran squad also for utility. These guys just rocking Inferno Pistols, which is nice. They're going to benefit because they're multi-weapons from Vulcan Heston's effect, so they can get wound rerolls on those things, in addition to the bonus strength and potentially bonus rerolls and +1 to wound that you get from Oath of Moment for playing Salamanders. Over to the almost 70 players, 69 players, nice. Fool's Errand GT. This event was won by Death Guard. It also saw Ultramarines as the follow-up, but we saw it won by Cass Kylie Burke, who is running a Virulent Victorium detachment. This included a Nurgle Demon Prince with Revolting Regeneration, a Lord of Contagion with a Nurgle Demon Weapon, Mortarion, and a Tallyman for command point generation. We did have a Deathshroud Terminator unit to go into that Lord of Contagion. However, we also saw a giant 10-man unit of Blight Lord Terminators. We then, following that up, had the classic package of 3 fitted blow drones with heavy blight launchers, Terminators. Interestingly, no Lord of Virulence in here, who feels like would be really good, but especially to give wound rerolls to those Blight Lord Terminators. But I guess those guys can hang out with Mortarion because he can give them all of their reactive effects, reactive moves, reactive shooting, fight on death, all of those things that a giant unit of Terminator is really annoying to deal with while it's benefiting from. We also then saw a single Flesh Mower Fetid Blow Drone, so you can either use that for utility or you can use it to kind of shore up a fight over the midboard, in addition to a Mephitic Blight Hauler unit for some additional anti-tank and 2 units of Poxwalkers for early game infiltration that you can then obsec objectives with. Funny thing about Poxwalkers is that they're way harder to kill than you think they are. Multiple times over the course of the weekend, I watch people attack Poxwalkers and then leave them on a couple models. Just because T4, sometimes -1 to be hit, and a feel no pain can stack up pretty high. Now, with that, we're going to hop over to the 66-player Silicon Valley GT, which was won by none other than Ruben Zhao, running Leagues of Votann. In this case, he was playing a Hearthband detachment, playing Buri Egnerson, and a Call with Bastion Shield to reduce incoming AP characteristics. No other characters. We don't see Uthar the Destined or any of those other guys. We do have a unit of 10 Hearthkin Warriors and a Sagittor in order to combat squad them, a unit of 10 Hearthkin Jaegers, and a Capricus Carrier to combat squad them. 1 unit of Brokir Thunderkin with Graviton Blast Cannons, a unit of 10 Chthonian Berserks, in addition to 20 Einhir Hearthguard, 2 units of 5, and a unit of 10. 2 Hackaton Land Fortresses to carry some of those guys to the fight, especially the Chthonian Berserks. A lot of times what happens is the Einhir Hearthguard gets sort of traded early so that your opponent has to come out and actually engage with them, and that either opens up the Chthonian Berserks and the Land Fortresses to counterattack, or lets you counter drop with the 10-man unit of Einhir Hearthguard and clear out whatever killed the little 5-mans. Obviously, especially if you can get into a Fortified Takeover, those Einhir Hearthguard become very difficult to remove. Just a 2+ save and relatively high toughness characteristic with a situational -1 to be wounded. Your opponent has to kind of commit pretty hefty stuff to kill them, and they're very good at killing opposing utility units. We then see a pair of Tarnkin Pioneer units in addition to the Capricus Carrier and Sagittor that I already mentioned to round out the list. Now, sticking with this event for a moment, the second place placer, also at 5-0, was Adeptus Custodes, playing Talons of the Emperor. Romain Chevalier ended up going undefeated at the event, running Inquisitor Kyria Draxus as the only character in the list, in addition to a pair of Venerable Land Raiders. So this looks like Talons of the Emperor running 1,000,000 Land Raiders. It is not quite. It is only 2, as well as 2 Caladia's Grav Tanks. So significantly more ranged focus than we've typically see from Talons in the past. We then see 20 Custodian Guard, 5 units of 4, an Anathema Psychona Rhino for some early game skirmishing. We have a pair of Prosecutor units, as well as a Witch Seekers squad, and all of the vehicles that I mentioned before. So relatively standard stuff for the most part, but obviously a little bit more heavily armored than even the typical Land Raider builds. It doesn't really focus entirely on the T12 2+ save profile, which is very classic of this build. It just sort of forces your opponent to deal with so much of that Land Raider defensive profile, and that's the question that if they can't deal with that specifically, whether or not they can win the matchup. However, what it does do is anything that comes out to kill the Land Raiders, you're going to be able to kill back more efficiently at range using those Caladius Grav Tanks, which is helpful. Now moving on to the 38-player Legia Primus. This was won by Simon Lader. We also saw Space Marines do fairly well there, running Ultramarines. It's classic, but it was won by Orks. Simon Lader running a Warhorde that included Boss Snickrot, Gaskell Thraka, as well as a Beast Boss, a Big Mech, 3 War Bosses, 2 standard foot War Bosses, as well as 1 in Mega Armor with Cunning but Brutal. We have a 10-man Beast Naga Boys unit to jump that Beast Boss into, in addition to the 20-man Boys squad. The Big Mech does have Follow Me Lads, so it can dual attach with Gaskell Thraka into that Boys unit. Classic combination. We have 2 units of Break a Boys that the War Bosses can hop into to give their +1 to hit, in addition to a pair of Burn a Boys. These guys are phenomenal little utility units, just 5 model units with 4 flamers in them that get wound rerolls when targeting enemies on objectives, which is neat. So they're actually pretty good at killing other utility units without having to commit any of the big, expensive, heavy infantry units or the big bricks. Speaking of which, we also then have a 5 model unit of Mega Knobs for the Mega Armored War Boss to hop into to add some big can openers in addition to some greater resilience, plus a 10 model Commando unit for early game utility, and a total of 4 trucks to carry around with a combination of the Burnas, the Breakas, and the Beast Snagas, and the Mega Knobs to the fight. Now hopping over to Wales for the NSGRC tournament. This was won by Dean Lees, who was playing Astra Militarum using Grizzled Company. This included a Cadian Castellan, in addition to a command squad, a pair of Militarum Tempestus command squads, and Nork Deadog, a pair of Road Worn tank commanders as well, in addition to a unit of 20 Cadian Shocktroopers to attach the Cadian Castellan and the command squad into. We have a trio of Khazarkan units, in addition to 2 Chimeras to ferry them to the fight, a trio of Krieg Combat Engineers, 3 units of 5, as well as 2 units of 5 Tempestus Scion units to carry to attach it with the Militarum Tempestus command squads for some additional deep striking orders and aggressive infantry squads. Hopping back over across the pond is the Battle for LA, parentheses, in Pasadena. This was won by Joshua Suarez, who was playing Army of Faith. Kind of an interesting selection. Not Champions of Faith, Army of Faith, the other detachment for Adepta Sororitas. This is the one that allows you to perform multiple acts of faith in a turn, so it focuses very heavily on big, high-impact, high-strong activations that are going to make great use of those acts of faith, especially things with random damage weapons, for example, that can potentially active faith in both a wound roll and a damage roll, or a pair of damage rolls, or something like that. You can also use them to respond to incoming damage, so heavily armored stuff you can protect yourself. There's also a bit of a theme in this detachment of aura effects, especially defensive effects. For example, you can use a Nor modifier stratagem on a jump pack unit and then broadcast that as an aura to all units within 3 inches of it. Similarly, you can use blinding radiance to give -1 to be hit, or you can attach that to a jump pack unit to give a -1 to hit aura. So a lot of interesting little pieces of technology in there, sort of efficiencies you can sneak out of that detachment. In this case, Joshua is running Morvenval, a jump pack canoness with the Blessed Halberd, a Battle Sister squad, in addition to a pair of Dominion squads. Those are all equipped with Melta guns. We have a Retributor squad that's with multi-meltas. We do have some of that jump pack synergy with a pair of Seraphim squads who have an easy time getting into position to utilize those effects because they're able to move, shoot, move. We have a Zephyrum squad in there as well, likely to attach in with the Blessed Halberd Canoness just for a disruption piece that can rapid ingress and then clear an opponent's objective or something. We have a trio of Immolators, so we're going to be able to combat squad all the Dominions and the Battle Sisters. So we have 3 units with heavy weapons that are going to go into the Immolators. Again, all of those can double active faith. The Immolators themselves can double active faith, so if you do have access to the correct number of miracle dice, you can be pumping all of those through multi-meltas for some extreme damage, in addition to getting a bunch of utility units out of those combat squads. Furthermore, we have a trio of Castigators. 1 of those is equipped with a battle cannon, 2 of them with auto cannons, and a unit of Paragon Warsuits to hang out with Morvenval. So lots of units that are able to make use of multiple acts of faith, both offensively and defensively. If your opponent does clear out the early aggressive units like the Immolators and the Dominions, that's just going to give you more of your miracle dice that you can use to fuel that detachment ability later on. Now moving over to Chaos Demons, who took down the Il Lo Regna Mortal GT. This was won by Jorge Valiente, who was playing Demonic Incursion, a list after my own heart, playing a bunch of big stompy demons. This includes Bellicor, as well as a Great Unclean One with Endless Gift for a 5+ Feel No Pain, Kairos Fate Weaver, a Pew Pew Gun Lord of Change with the Everstave, in addition to Scarbrand. Last and certainly not least in here, we have the Changeling, who has lone operative, so he's able to hold down objectives. Gives us 5 total greater demons, in addition to a bunch of utility. What's interesting is that there's no infantry in the list, besides, I guess, the Changeling, because we're running a pair of Fleshhound units and a trio of Beasts of Nurgle. No units like Plague Bearers, for example, instead focusing very heavily on early game scoring from the Beasts of Nurgle, in addition to mid and late game scoring from the Fleshhounds, who are able to naturally up down themselves as the game continues. But otherwise, just a bunch of big stompy demon boys, which is always cool to see. Speaking of big stompy boys, let's talk about Imperial Knights, which won the Battle for the Big Country GT. This was taken down by Jacob Deering, who was playing Questoris Companions. This included a Cerastus Knight Atropos, a Knight Lancer with Herald of Triumph, another Knight Lancer with Pennant of Silver Fury, a Knight Crusader with Wormslayer Divination, an Armiger Halvrin, an Armiger Warglaive, and a Calidus Assassin. Neat. And that brings us to our last list of the episode. This is Christian Brewer, who is playing at Extra Schicht. We're going with that. 5.0, he was playing a Biosanctic Brood Surge, which included a trio of Abominants, one with Predatory Instincts, one with Alien Majesty, a Biophagus, a Patriarch with Biomorph Adaptation for extra damage, in addition to a Reductor Saboteur. We have 2 units of Handflamer Acolyte Hybrids for some skirmishing, 3 units of Aberrants to join in with the Abominants, in addition to a bunch of Achilles Ridge Runners. 1 just Heavy Mortar Ridge Runner, and then 2 units of 2 with heavy mining lasers. Those guys are able to provide crossfire, which is nice, especially the heavy mining laser guy. But the other thing is that it allows the list to play a little bit cagier, because we are taking like a ranged element, whereas oftentimes you do see Biosanctic Brood Surge taking entirely just charging units that makes use of the detachment ability. This list can stay back and shoot a little bit more. We do have a Goliath truck to carry around some of the infantry to the fight. That includes a unit of hybrid metamorphs. We do have 1 unit of 10, as well as 1 unit of 5. Almost certainly that unit of 10 is going to join in with the Biophagus, which then unlocks the detachment ability for it. Last and certainly not least is 15 Pure Strain Genestealers, 1 unit of 10 and 1 unit of 5. The unit of 5 good for an early game trading piece to clear out opposing screens, to then open up charges for your Acolyte Hybrids and for your Aberrants. And then the unit of 10 goes in with the Patriarch, so he can do weird combat movement shenanigans, because there is a 6-inch pylon consolidate strat in Biosanctic Brood Surge. Fairly standard stuff from this detachment. It is a great, well-rounded detachment when you're bringing these ranged elements in there, because the detachment's already good at delivering and executing on melee game plans, but with guns, it then can also have a shooting phase too, which is awesome. But with that, that is going to be all the best Armies Warhammer 40k for this week. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, everybody. Thanks as well to everyone who supports Tactical Tortoise, whether that's over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing, and I love you. It's currently 2 a.m., and I just live streamed all weekend. I'm very tired, so if this video is a mess, that would be why. Please go watch my live stream coverage from over the weekend. I really appreciate everyone who gave their support during that show. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.